What if I told you there was a section of interstate barely 50 miles long that may have more extremes packed into it than almost anywhere else you can drive in the country? That's a pretty big statement, but hear me out. What starts in the foothills begins to climb, and within a short distance, it's already pushing 4,000 feet. Before this stretch is finished, it's crossed 4 mountain summits and carried drivers across a concrete bridge standing hundreds of feet above a canyon floor, one of the highest bridges of its type in the entire interstate system. But the bridge doesn't end the extremes. It's just where the road starts to change again. A few miles beyond that, the interstate begins falling toward the desert, and the terrain becomes so steep, broken, and unforgiving that the two sides of this same freeway could no longer stay together, both sides separating and going through separate canyons. And for a while, the eastbound and westbound lanes are not just separated by a median, they're separated by a mountain itself, nearly 1.5 miles apart, which creates a whole other problem. The canyons don't just carry traffic, they carry wind, basically turning parts of this grade into a natural wind tunnel. Gusts can grow strong enough to close the road to high-profile vehicles, and in extreme events, winds have been clocked here near 100 miles an hour. And if the wind wasn't enough, just past here, gravity takes over. The highway loses nearly 3,000 feet of elevation on a long 6% grade, steep enough that trucks are held to 35 miles an hour, with a runaway truck ramp waiting near the bottom for the ones that cannot hold it. After the mountains, it goes to the opposite extreme and keeps pushing into the desert valley, where the pavement does not stop at sea level, but drops below it, to the lowest point of any interstate in our system. Summer heat above 120 degrees is fairly normal here, and long exposed stretches, not to mention the chance for sudden flash flooding and miles of desert where help may not be close when something goes wrong. Because this same interstate keeps pressing toward the largest mass of sand dunes in Southern California, a shifting desert barrier more than 40 miles long, the same moving sand that once forced early builders to lay a wooden plank road across the desert just to keep traffic moving, all in a location so devoid of traffic. Many wondered why they built it at all. My name is Scott, and today we're taking a danger-ahead look at a portion of a highway that is not just dangerous to drive, it's like a gauntlet. This is the Kumeyaay Highway, simply known to most who travel it as the 8. Let's go beyond the exit. Even by highway standards, Interstate 8 lands in the shorter ranks of the interstate highway system. From the edge of the Pacific Ocean in San Diego to where it joins Interstate 10 near Casa Grande, Arizona, it only roughly travels 350 miles. And traffic-wise, it has a Jekyll-Hyde personality that can be drawn roughly where it crosses Interstate 5. West of the 5, it is a multi-lane monster, helping flow nearly 250,000 vehicles a day. East of there, traffic begins to tail off quickly, and there's where the real story of Interstate 8 begins. Now, east of El Cajon, the road begins to climb through the Cuyamaca and Laguna Mountain foothills. The suburbs start to thin out, and before you know it, you're climbing into the mountains that stand between San Diego and the desert. You also notice that most of the commuters are gone, and you're left with commercial trucks and vehicles, probably RVs and campers, and travelers just looking to pass through. Caltrans estimates are around 10 to 20,000 per day. Not abandoned, but definitely more desolate than most stretches of road. It was built back in the 70s and cost around $350 million overall, which when translated in today's money would be $1.5 billion. Still probably a good bargain for what it is, but it asks the questions, why build here at all? For those not familiar with the region, it may surprise you to know that Interstate 8 was not the first road to fight the terrain here. It was just the latest response to a path centuries in the making. San Diego possesses a natural gateway to the Pacific, but to be more than just an isolated harbor at the edge of the continent, it needed a dependable route east. Long before the interstate era, the earliest paths through this country were engineered for survival rather than speed. Geography and need, water, shade, canyons, and passes dictated the journey, forming a fragile chain of waypoints where humans and animals could endure an unforgiving landscape, mainly traversed by the Kumeyaay people for whom the interstate is officially named today. Over time, this hard-won knowledge gave way to organized stage lines, beginning in 1857 with the San Antonio and San Diego Mail Line. This was followed by the famous Butterfield Overland Mail. Now, decades later, the first motorist arrived, discovering that the heat and shifting sand could defeat an internal combustion engine just as easily as a mule team. This route was formalized as the Dixie Overland Highway in 1914, one of the first of the auto trail era. Its name leaning heavily into the fame of the Dixie Highway and the previously mentioned stage line. And it was considered by many experts to be the first practical year-round ocean-to-ocean highway. In fact, that Dixie Overland forged the path that would later become US 80, which itself laid the physical groundwork for the modern interstate. Moving east out of San Diego, the easy driving ends the moment the pavement clears the coastal foothills. While the modern interstate uses deep mountain cuts and massive engine horsepower to smooth out an ascent, a century ago this geography was an absolute wall for mechanical transportation. For most travelers, it made more sense to take a massive train detour all the way through Los Angeles than to risk forcing a private trip over the desolated ridges toward Yuma. Then, in 1901, the Imperial Valley changed the stakes. Water from the Colorado River transformed a dry desert basin into a massive farming powerhouse. San Diego looked east and saw booming trade and immense wealth right on the other side of the barrier. But the first attempts at a mountain auto trail or road were a complete disaster. Early motorists tried to fight that terrain, but it only beat them down. A drive from San Diego to Kumeyaay took nearly 8 grueling hours just to reach the high country, something that today takes less than an hour and a half depending on traffic. Now, Colonel Ed Fletcher, who carried that name because he was the lieutenant colonel in the California National Guard, later a state senator, a developer, and a road promoter, even attempted trying a quicker way through on the old stage road toward Mountain Springs and Devil's Canyon, but taking nearly 48 hours to accomplish the 8-hour drive. Now, Ed's tale and portion of this expands greatly once we get later into the story, but for now, we want to finish giving you the lay of the land. Going back to the modern highway eastbound on I-8, we step through a chain of 4 high roadway summits, each one over 4,000 feet. First comes Carpenter's Summit at 4,052 feet, and before the road settles into the high country, it has to cross a gap the old highway never solved cleanly, Pine Valley Creek Canyon. That crossing is the Pine Valley Creek Bridge, standing roughly 450 feet above the canyon floor. It's one of those unique spots where I-8 deserves a closer look, because the way this bridge was constructed was unique for the United States at the time, first of its kind. It was actually built out over open air using a cast-in-place balanced cantilever construction. If you'd like to hear about it, let us know. We'd love to build an episode around it. It really is a full engineering story hiding in the middle of a mountain crossing. Basically the middle of nowhere. Roughly 4 miles later, the freeway reaches Laguna Summit at 4,055 feet. The road then takes a pretty good dip at this point, and about 11 to 14 miles farther east reaches Crestwood Summit, the highest point on all of I-8, around 4,181 feet eastbound. Now after Crestwood, there's one more high point before the real drop, Tecate Divide, sitting at about 4,140 feet. Now from there, the road starts giving up elevation fast, descending toward Hakumba, In-Ko-Pah Gorge, and Mountain Spring Grade. That's where the freeway drops toward the Imperial Desert through some of the harshest terrain on the route. The two directions don't even stay together. Eastbound traffic falls through the In-Ko-Pah Gorge, while westbound traffic climbs through the Devil's Canyon. At their widest point, they're actually separated by nearly 1.5 miles. Now, at this point, you may be wondering about the wind we mentioned earlier. Well, we haven't forgotten it. The wind problem out here is not pinned to one curve or one canyon. Caltrans can post high wind advisories across a long stretch of I-8, from the Alpine area all the way to Coyote Wells, warning campers, trailers, and permitted loads to stay away. This section has been closed to high-profile vehicles when the wind gets bad enough, often reaching near 100 miles an hour. Now, when you mix that wind with the top of the Mountain Springs grade, the speed limit for trucks has been reduced to 35 miles an hour. At the bottom, there is a runaway truck ramp, and for the rare moments when the road has already taken away the easy options. Now we reach the bottom of the grade at Ocotillo, and the character of the drive shifts instantly. Ahead lies a completely different kind of country, lower, flatter, and hotter, and in many ways far less forgiving. As the highway enters the Imperial Valley, the straight lanes and wide open horizon can quickly lull a driver into a false sense of security, especially with the mountains in your rearview mirror. The thing is, it hasn't disappeared, it's just changed shape. A basin where extreme heat at vast distance do exactly the same destructive work that the cliffs and grades did back in the mountains. You can actually see for miles, but that doesn't mean help is anywhere near close. In the brutal summer months when temperatures routinely climb past 120 degrees, a mechanical failure isn't just inconvenient. A blown tire or an overheated engine, strangely, can turn into a survival situation in just a matter of minutes. The road through here is actually the lowest point that's not a structure like a tunnel on the entire interstate system. Here, you're nearly 50 feet lower than the Pacific Ocean you left back in San Diego. Now, during the monsoon seasons, July to September, this area can be a flash flood hazard, believe it or not. It rarely receives rainfall at all, but during that time, the ground is so hard packed, like most desert ground, it has nowhere to really go. And while not usually a direct hazard for I-8, should the road close down, there really aren't any detour routes that might be above water. Dust storms are a real problem through this area, some that have been noted to even close this corridor temporarily as well. And yet, standing in complete defiance of the desert around it, it's a very rich farm area that was transformed from a barren wasteland into a massive green agricultural empire, woven together by fields and irrigation canals. After leaving that valley, you'd think that all the extremes had been left behind, but there's still one more yet to experience. That is the sand. East of the fertile fields of the valley, the greenery vanishes just as quickly as it appeared. That horizon turns into a mountain of blinding, shifting quartz silt. This is the Indigenous Dunes, also known as the Imperial Sand Dunes. It's a massive, restless sand barrier stretching over 40 miles long and 7 miles wide, a seamless ocean of hills rising over 100 feet high, migrating with the wind. To early travelers, this wasn't just an obstacle, it was an absolute dead end. The sand here was so loose it would stop horses, swallow wagon wheels, and proved to be just as much a struggle for the automobile. Then came the agricultural explosion of the Imperial Valley, and San Diego's civic leaders realized they had to conquer the dunes or risk being completely bypassed. And the man who stepped up was one that we talked about earlier in our story, a fellow by the name of Ed Fletcher. In 1915, Fletcher launched an engineering concept that mainstream civil engineers openly mocked as the most asinine thing they had ever heard of, a boardwalk for automobiles. But Fletcher wasn't joking, and he shipped over 13,000 Oregon pine planks into the desert. Working in the blistering heat, teams of volunteers manually spiked the wood into parallel tracks laid directly over the shifting sand dunes. A year later, the state upgraded it to an 8-foot wide road of pre-assembled wooden sections held together by iron straps. It was quite a unique sight. For 7 miles, early motorists literally floated across a sea of moving sand on a wooden ribbon. It was definitely crude and temporary, but it did prove one thing, that there was a way to beat the dunes. By 1926, highway engineers figured out that while smaller dunes moved rapidly, the massive 100-foot hills moved slow enough to support a permanent surface, and laid down a paved road over top of it. Decades later, the builders of Interstate 8 arrived to lay down a multi-lane high-speed superhighway over that exact same shifting ground. Standing out there today, looking at the massive concrete ribbons cutting through the endless waves of sand, the scale of the achievement is pretty staggering. As modern travelers, we never have to experience that. We pass through the dunes in a matter of minutes at 70 miles an hour, the air conditioner running and completely oblivious to the chaos underneath the asphalt. The freeway makes the impossible look easy. As we get closer to the Arizona border, the gauntlet is finally over. The highway finally reaches Yuma, but by then the short interstate has already made its point. It was never just a connector between San Diego and Arizona, it was built across every obstacle Southern California could put in its way. You know, the corridor that Interstate 8 follows has been making history for centuries, literally. Maybe you've got a story that you'd like to share with us about it. If so, please leave it in the comments. We try to answer each and every one, and we love reading them. We also know that we haven't told the whole story of the Dixie Overland Highway or US Route 80, the roads that preceded the interstate. We have a separate series called America's Legendary Highways, and we would love to do a separate episode on the entirety of that highway. If that's something you'd be interested in too, please let us know in the comments as well. Hopefully you enjoyed our story today, and if you did, if you wouldn't mind reaching over right now and hitting that like button, and maybe sharing it with a friend that would enjoy it as well. We really appreciate that. It helps us go a lot further on YouTube. You know, something else you might want to do if you're enjoying our stories already, why don't you come along with us and join our BTE caravan? We'd love to have you ride along with us. Anyway, we know there are a lot of stops on this great big highway called YouTube. Whether you just came upon us or you decided to turn off the road to come and see us, we're glad you went beyond the exit to spend some time with us. As always, we want to thank you for watching and say God bless.